miles south of Pittsburgh. And we're in the Big 12 when it comes to athletics. And one of the other things that we have at the Reed College of Media is a sports and adventure sequence. And one of the things we wanted to do was engage you all on what it was like to produce a sporting event. And so with me today in the background is Whitney Goodwin, excuse me, and you'll see her maybe near the end when she wants to engage and say hello. You can see some of our social media channels, both Twitter, TikTok, the Instagram, as well as our handles. I'm actually on Twitter. I'm CSCATTweet. And so we're going to walk you through a bunch of different things and scenarios today. And one of the things we really wanted to do was to put you in the scenario of what it was like to be inside a live sports production. So what does it take when you are doing a sporting event? And some of you may have been able to do this already in high school, which would be really cool. If not, this is just ahead for you. Well, it does take a team, and the producer is just sort of the coordinator or the quarterback, or even sometimes I've heard it as like the offensive coordinator. But still, it takes these individuals you're seeing on this screen: the director, the TD, technical director, the assistant director, the associate producer, and that list kind of goes on. And that's just inside the television truck. That really does, and some of the camera people and audio people at the event. That doesn't account for if you had a studio or if you had operations going on nearby you. And so as an example, the Super Bowl just came to a close. And here's an example of what they did. It's for CBS. This is just for CBS. 120 cameras, 18 robotic, 32 cameras were embedded into various pieces of content, 2 wireless pylon cams, and then you'll note 19 television mobile units. That picture is kind of small, but that's the truck compound. And inside that are all the men and women that put on the Super Bowl. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, is just all those different people that were able to participate in the Super Bowl, and sort of this team at a smaller level. And we're going to walk you through an exercise. So that sort of is the team and what it makes, to put on a or what it takes to put on a production. So let me ask this question, and you can hit the chat or you can give a shout out if you want. Does anyone have a really good idea of, you saw what the producer and director sort of that was their team, but does anyone know really what a producer does? Do they have an idea? Do they want to shout out what they think a producer does?
They manage the overall operation, and like make sure everything is organized and calculated chaos.
That's really good, Landon. That's a great example. And here's the definition. We're kind of looking at item 2, a person who supervises work such as a staged or recorded performance for exhibition and for public dissemination. And so I joke a couple of times. This is a friend of mine, Bo. He's the guy on the left. We worked with each other for a million years at ESPN, and we were at an event about 5 years after not seeing each other. And sure enough, this was what we wore. And so there was a lot of funny chatter on social media that this is the uniform. But Landon, you pointed out exactly what it is like logistics and managing a lot of behind the scenes. So here's where I want to engage with all of you and have a little fun. And I've actually done this with a couple of my college classes. And then we have a club that, for pay, they help participate in a number of Big 12 sporting events behind the scenes. So when I was a kid growing up, there was a thing called IBM Presents You Make the Call. And they used to have these moments where during a football game, they would throw out a situation that the referees had to make the call. And you got to say, oh, I think it was this or that. And then they would do a commercial, and then they'd come back and tell you. So that's what we're going to try and do. This is your seat. That's actually our truck right there. That's our production unit that we work with at the Reed College of Media, West Virginia University Athletics, and our Big 12 competition. I mentioned Whitney. That's her over there on the right-hand side. That's our replay area. But the producer seat is way up front there in this photo. And this is your view. Now, that's not me, but that's a couple of our students in the middle and to the right. And that's a different producer. Eric is his name. But that's the monitor wall. And then if you look down below on this slide, you can see all the different sources that are coming in real time. So Landon said, managing sort of logistics and chaos. Yes, there's a lot of logistics that go into the actual moment where then you're there in the truck And then you have to manage this information that's coming in real time. So that's your seat, that's your view. Okay, and so here we go. Now, as the example we're going to put forth, and I'm going to have you open up and vote. You're going to make a vote here in a second. We're going to actually ask you for your opinion. There's really no right or wrong, but I'm going to ask you what the call is. What is your source? What replay did you think we should go with? Now, this schematic you may be seeing is a basketball 5 camera. Clearly, you can have more. You can have 8 cameras. You can have 12 cameras. Hockey has a different schematic. Football has a different schematic. But for this exercise, we went with a college basketball court, and you can see the corresponding cameras and the corresponding placement in and around the court. Now, clearly, camera 5 isn't right there in the corner. It's usually about 20 to 40 rows up as a slash. Sometimes for our camera placement of the slash camera at WVU in the Coliseum, we'll actually move it into the student section, and it makes for a really cool angle as well. But you can see camera 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the sources of video that'll be coming in, and that's how you get it into that giant wall monitor. As an example, though, camera 1 is typically our game. And up next is what the game angle is of the play. I'm going to have you make the call. Okay, here's the game angle. This is how it actually happened on the air. Okay, so that was Derek Culver with a slam dunk early in the game. And now we have to go and decide what the call is going to be. Now, here's your sources. I showed you the camera placement. Here's X, Y, blue, gold, or X, blue, gold, Y. Doesn't matter how you look at it. This is how I set it up in the control room for me in my monitor wall. X, Y across the top, blue, gold across the bottom. And there'll be a reason why. I tell you that in a second. So those are your sources, and that's the play. You can actually see a screen grab from the play. Okay, time for you to make the call. Producers, get ready. Here's what you would see. Here's X. Here's blue. Here's gold. Here's Y. Let me pause right there. And one of my helpers, Whitney, I think we're going to pop open a chat. What is your call? Are you going to go with replay X, blue, gold, or Y? And if it's,
yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys got it. Just put it in the chat there and we'll take a vote. Looks like Y is the winner so far, Chuck, by a mile.
By a mile. I love it. And I'm going to ask why in a second. And in real time, you would have to do that in, say, 2 seconds or less. My choice, those of you that chose Y. I too chose Y. I'll tell you why I chose Y, but I'm interested. Anybody want to shout out why they liked Y versus the other ones?
We got a close-up of the dunk. The player was closest to the camera in that view.
David, that's right. The action was coming at you versus some of the other angles. Gold, as an example, was really, really close to what game angle looked like. X was the backside. So unless it was a monster dunk as, say, the clock was expiring, X wouldn't necessarily work for that particular angle. Anyone else care to say why they liked Y or why they picked something else? Because it was early enough in the game and Derek's one of our star athletes, you probably could have gotten away with just about anything. And so there's no really wrong answer. I'm just curious if anyone else liked a different angle.
So someone in the chat, Chuck, says that Y gave the up close angle to show the viewer what really happened, which I think is also a good point because we don't always I think we take for granted that we see that angle, but the general person does not see that angle very often.
Whitney, thank you. That's a great one. There's also, there's other plays that could show up. X sometimes could show you the backside, maybe if there's a great pick and you see somebody get around the pick and then they finish the play. The one thing that's really important, I want you all to know as a student producer, and if you move into this role, there's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's really in the moment, you've made a decision. If you start to get some wrong ones, you may have some bosses after a while ask why you went a certain way. Like, why did you keep showing the same replay, in this case, gold, when gold looks a lot like game? So one of the things I look for when I set it up, and that's the reason I set it up the way I do, I know that if it's a good play to my left, that it's probably on X or blue. If it's a great play down to my right, in this case, it was to my right from where I'm looking at the floor, I knew my choices were probably Y or gold, but gold looks a lot like game, so that's why I probably would go with just Y. Coming at you, here it is. You see him push, get good position, and he finishes. So that's really great. I'll pause there, Whitney, in case there was any other good comments in the chat, and I'll ask if anybody else had anything else to add.
Just a few more people in the chat echoing that the angle feels most different, like you just mentioned about how it's very different from game. And I will say too, there are sometimes that we can do back-to-back replays, depending on how good the game is and where we are in the game and how much time you have. So sometimes we make that call too, to see it from a few angles. For example, this weekend we had a situation where we had an athlete make a half-court shot, which is not something we see a lot. So because we had the half-court shot and it was going into halftime and we had some extra time there, we actually did a few angles. So to Chuck's point, it kind of does depend sometimes where you are in the game, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your choice is wrong.
Perfect. And I will add, and then we'll move on to one other way you can tell a story, and that is sometimes you can get sequential. You can actually have perhaps a big pick followed by a big slam by a hard foul, and you want to see all of it. And it's plausible that you could say, we're going to go X to Y, and then maybe gold, because it's ISO and up close gives you that great like Superman flex or whatever it might be. And it's across all sports. If you even have hockey, you may have the backside look after the play gets to the puck gets to the stick and then somebody makes a goal. So that's really awesome. I'm glad that you guys participated in that, making the call. Now there's another way you can tell a story, and I'll come off a video and I'm going to show you graphics. Now this was an actual graphic we did in one of our games. It just so happened that Oscar Shibwe, and if you know the backstory on Oscar, he was with WVU and he was a McDonald's All-American, and he was a very good player who's now transferred to Kentucky. That's where we are today. But at the time, we did what at the time I did not know as the producer of this game was his last game as a Mountaineer. And so going through the notes and talking with the sports information director and directors, and also talking to my talent when we did our breakout sessions, in this case, Zooms ahead of time, pre-planning. So one of the students already said logistics and managing information. One of the storylines we picked up on was Oscar's had some good games and he's also had some not so good games. And so we were trying to figure out a way to do this. And so we built this graphic, which I always like to say, if you're someplace where you can't hear what the announcers are saying, but you can see what's being said. Perhaps you're at a sports gathering restaurant, and so you can see the game, but you can't hear it. Well, you can tell a story. So this was late in the game, and it turns out that Oscar actually had a good game. So finally, after struggling with a couple of good games, bad games, in this case, he had 4 good and 3 bad, and we weren't sure where he was because he'd also sat out a game. And now he had a good game. In this game, he finally had 12 points, 15 rebounds, and we weren't sure what we were going to call it. And finally, we had an option of consistent play, or we also had another version where it was inconsistent play. And we went with this version because he had a good outing. As it turned out, we were onto something, because roughly 48 hours after this, he announced that he was leaving the team and he just was seeking a different location. So that's another way you can tell stories, through graphics, and you as the producer have to manage that information and have a list of things you want to talk about and present to your graphics team, and they help build those storylines ahead of time and sometimes in flight. Has anyone had an experience to do anything like that in terms of graphics, perhaps even through your homeroom 101 program, or even a sporting event that you have done at one of your high schools? I'll pause in case there's a chat or a shout out. Maybe not. Oh, go ahead.
I put in the chat if you guys want to respond. I don't know. Does anyone do live sports production at all with their high school? You guys can also unmute. We're super chill here.
Yeah, whatever. It's totally cool.
We have a few yeses, Chuck.
That's really cool.
And then we have a few live sports, but we don't do graphics.
That's cool. So you're covering an event and you're documenting what's happening. And so people can't get there for whatever reason. They're busy, or current state of affair of COVID and whatnot. So that's really cool. My heart goes out to you, because I didn't have that opportunity in high school. Heck, I didn't even have that opportunity in college. I had to go create that experience for myself. But here now at WVU, we actually have that experience. So we got to look at an actual sports replay and a sequence of things that you could sample, a graphic, and that's how you make the call. Now, there is another way, and there's a different thing you can get involved with when you're producing and making the call and you're in the, quote, hot seat. And that's if you've got an event that isn't here inside a coliseum or inside a football stadium or inside the ice rink. Suppose you've got an adventure media thing that you're going to go cover, and all of a sudden you can't have a truck with 13 miles of cable and you're going to try and cover, say, a whitewater rafting adventure. And that's a true thing. And one way you can do it is through cool pieces of media. GoPro is the standard of which I have used on a number of occasions. There are smart devices that you can use, like on occasion, your smart device, but you may not want to have it in that position. GoPros, super durable, and you can put them in just about every location: helmets, chest, rafts. And that's one of the things I'm going to unpack for you here in a minute. I've got a clip from a past show that I worked on. So I think it was David early on who said, well, producer is someone who manages all the information and logistics, kind of works with the team, the director, and they help choreograph a lot of stuff. So this is an actual word slide snapshot we recently did in one of my other jobs before I came to the Reed College of Media. We took our head football coach down a whitewatering trip, and we had to figure out a way to cover it. Now, this was the logistics part of it. We went in a week ahead of time, met with the people from the barbecue, the people that helped us at the Canyon Rim bathhouse, where we were going to do our safety check, how we were going to load onto the bus, because it's a 25-minute ride down from the rim of the canyon to where you put into the river, where we were going to eat lunch, where we were going to take out, things that we're going to have to figure out, like how we were going to get back to the airport, and then see certain key people. So there was a ton of logistics that went into it. And I mentioned we had to go in a whole week ahead of time. It was myself, my associate producer, and my cameraman. And we had to figure out all these different things and interact with all these different people. The payoff though, is an orchestrated day. And then you're able to manage the event. Now, the event had 4 GoPros, 1 chase boat, 1 dry land crew, ENG crew that actually went up and down the canyon where there was road accessibility, and then an onboard boat that the 2 chase boats had cameras that could capture us. And ultimately, I'm showing all this because then this was the final product of the actual rafting segment. Now, this turned into a little bit of a music video that was one of our tweener segments. And tweener means, for me, we had an hour-long show, 8 segments, and so we had to figure out how to fit into about a 42-minute content with 16 minutes of commercial, and this was the final product. And you'll see the GoPros here in a second.
This is a good look at what West Virginia looks like too, for those of you that aren't familiar.
And that was also where that's a GoPro that's mounted on the bow of the boat. You can see it right there going into the water. That's that same GoPro. You can see one of the dry boxes in the middle there. Those were the 3 primary boats. There was a chase boat and then 1 chase kayaker. My lead cameraman is right in the middle there on the sunglasses. That's our head coach, former head coach in the front. So this was a music interlude to get us back into the show. It was about the middle of the show. And then this was our music video. Right here.
The footage you guys are seeing is actually from the newest national park as well.
So a ton of fun. There was one more bump to break. And this is called Jump Rock. And that's how we went to commercial break. And it was a ton of fun. A lot of logistics. You saw the list. I don't know if there's any specific questions. You heard Whitney say that's the newest national park, which was just added. Super ton of fun. Again, there was a lot of logistics that went into it ahead of time, a pre-trip. the other thing that I haven't totally shared with you is all those sources. I had to make sure they stayed battery charged, that we're still recording, and that they were capturing the media safely. I think we lost one card that didn't quite do what it needed to do halfway through. And then I had to bring those all back, and with my associate producer, we then put them into a timeline and then spent hours transcoding, reviewing, logging, and matching our detailed list of the shot sheets of what we thought would take place to what actually did take place. And then we dropped those into an edit timeline to create the 42-minute show, 8 segments, and all the different branding, fonts, ins and outs. And then also, there was one other thing you noticed in the music video. We actually had to negotiate getting the media rights, the logistics or the clearance, the copyright of that song, so that we could actually air that. So that's one other way you can produce and make a call on something that's really unique, and that is definitely one of them. I think I'm near the end. I wanted to hand this over to Whitney. She's been working behind the scenes along with her graduate assistant, Lily. Thank you, Lily. They've been answering your questions and popping in and out. We have a really cool program at WVU, and these were some of the things you can partake in them, including some of the things I just showed you there. Whitney.
Yeah, so we just kind of wanted to show you some of the other things that our students do in this capacity. I know that some of you said you have done stuff at your school, which is awesome. We love that. But if you haven't, we kind of wanted to open your eyes to some other career opportunities. Chuck talked at the beginning about all of those behind the scenes opportunities. We chatted a little bit about that in the chat. It really does take a small army to pull off any sort of sporting event, whether you are in the live sports production, whether you are a media member, covering it as a reporter, doing color play-by-play. There's just so many different avenues that you can take in the sports industry. And so we actually started this major at WVU. It's called Sport and Adventure Media. It's the only one of its kind to exist in the country. And Lily can probably pop that link in the chat to learn more. But basically, what we were finding is that different needs exist in different places. So all of our students coming through that, wanted to go into sports always wanted to work at ESPN or NBC Sports. And while those are really great opportunities and really great jobs, there's so much more than just those things. And so we wanted to really expand those horizons. We also were starting to see that students who wanted to work for a specific team or who wanted to work for a college really needed to have a good background in sports management as well as sports media. And so that's kind of what this does. The sports media side of this combines those sports management classes and then things like we just talked about, live sports production, how to be a sideline reporter, color commentary, play-by-play. Our PA announcer for WVU Athletics teaches the class on voice and kind of finding your style if you want to be on air. We have students that want to focus in sports photography, sports radio. So it kind of houses all of those things, but also gives you that sports management, sports marketing background. And then the adventure media side is a whole other section that students can choose. And this one's really unique. I know in the chat, we talked about how a lot of you hadn't heard of adventure media or maybe haven't done adventure storytelling. But especially pre-COVID, the tourism and hospitality industry were just blowing up and they need people to create content for them. People are not going to go places that they can't see. That's why travel vloggers are super popular. That's why influencers are super popular, right? Because they're showing you via social media, via Instagram, via their vlog, what a resort looks like, what a place looks like. I stayed at this Airbnb. They're making money from that. And so storytelling is really important in that aspect. That's why the documentary section of Netflix is so popular too, right? We want to know more about things that we see. We want to know more about places that we can go. And so I think that we're going to start seeing this more and more too as things open back up. There's going to be more demand for it, although there still is right now. And so that adventure side can cover adventure sports like we saw with Chuck with whitewater rafting. I mentioned the rock climbing project that we did in Utah a few years ago. in the chat, but it can also be more of that hospitality, travel, tourism, recreational journalism storytelling as well. And it's a different type of storytelling. It's similar to sports storytelling, but it's very different than news storytelling. So it deserved its own major. And so that's why we ended up here with the sport and adventure media. Now we do have partnerships with the ESPNU Campus Connection for students that want to be on air. And then all of that footage you saw is actually through our ESPN Plus Campus Connection. Our students can actually start working for us as freshmen with the ESPN Plus Campus Connection. We had a few of them in the truck the night that you saw that footage from. So students are constantly learning how to do all of those things. Someone in the chat mentioned you'd like to learn how to do graphics. That actually comes from a machine called Expression, and that happens in real time. So we have problems in real time. We're making graphics in real time, but it's also helpful because like Chuck mentioned, you know, if a teammate leaves or something happens, especially with COVID, people are in and out, schedules change because things are being rescheduled. We can make those changes in real time, and it's just as helpful for the audience as it is for our announcers. So there's a lot that goes on behind this major. So I'm going to show you a quick video of some of the things our students have done. You'll see some more whitewater rafting, but you'll see some things like zip lining in there. West Virginia is a huge state for hospitality, travel, and tourism because you notice whitewater rafting, we're known for that, but we also have a lot of hiking, a lot of trails, a lot of ATV activity here, and so our students really have a lot of access to those types of activities.
Here it comes.
So we use GoPros a lot. You can use regular cameras when you're shooting adventure stuff as well, but if you're doing something like whitewater rafting, definitely prefer the GoPro. We also have a sports talk show, which Chuck is in charge of. It's called Mountaineer Playbook. So the studio activity that you guys see there, that's actually Mountaineer Playbook students, and they are creating a 15-minute sports talk show. It's more whitewater rafting. And so one of the things too with the adventure media I think is cool is that you get to learn all these skills, right? Because you're not going to be able to tell a good video story if you don't know how to mountain bike or if you don't know how to rock climb. So the skill set is actually just as much part of the major as it is, you know, covering it. So I think that's a really cool part of this industry. I know some of you indicated you're interested in being in this industry. Once you graduate from high school, we would love to answer your questions. Chuck has been in the industry longer than I have, but I'm actually coming up on my 10-year anniversary of working in live sports production, which kind of makes me feel old. But we've done a lot of different things between us. So we'd love to answer any questions that you guys have about what we talked about or what you might be getting yourself into.
Yeah, so hit the chat or pop it open. I have been doing television for 25 plus years now. We just talked about Adventures on the Gorge and whitewater rafting. Actually, not Tuesday, but Thursday, I have a drop-in guest. He's the social media manager for Adventures on the Gorge, and he's going to visit with our class, one of my classes, to talk about what they're getting ready for as the spring season is about ready to hit, and how they're going to manage that. Zip lines, paddleboarding, whitewater rafting, biking, everything. But hit us in the chat or open up and say hello and ask your question, because we still have, I don't know, 5-10 minutes left.
And I would say while you guys are thinking of questions, that's another thing that we also really, you know, have students that want to go into this and have students that have internships in it. But social media is such a huge component of sports media and adventure media. We talked about influencers, but I know for us, for WVU athletics in general, so many people request that content from us all the time. Actually, I spend a lot of time at Replay creating highlights that will live on social media, and highlights are some of the most watched things.
So I think if there's, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. It says, what can you do? What can you do to get into sports media in high school?
That's a great question. So I think it does depend a little bit on where you are geographically, because you would need sports to be happening right now. And you could also have a small challenge with a lot of the regional networks, as well as the over the air networks are very selective about what, if you're not 18 or older, to manage or be around their equipment, just for safety and legal liability reasons. However, if you're fortunate enough and your high school has that, that's the best place to start. Build that depth, that rep, that muscle memory, if you will, and then make your pick in college. And then hopefully when you're in college, so we can relax those rules a bit, if you can say it that way. Whitney and I have done a game where there's been a freshman TD, a sophomore on bug. I'm not sure what your Chloe is, but she's
I was going to say, so Chloe's a sophomore, but I've also had a freshman at replay.
and Chloe's been
Trial
next to
by
her.
fire a little
Yeah.
bit.
There's probably been 3 or 4 camera people as freshmen or sophomores. Audio assist has definitely been at least sophomore. Trying to think which other students I've had. So some of those students have been in my class or other production classes, and then they've joined this production television club we have with our partnership with the athletic department and Big 12 and ESPN Plus. And it's sort of a hodgepodge of how we get the events covered.
And for those of you that are interested, I know that, a lot of you indicated you live, in places like California. We have grads there working for teams, working for networks. I have a really good friend who works for NBC Sports. If you guys want to talk to people in the industry, we have plenty of grads in the industry that would love to talk to you and give you some more information. I think networking in high school is often overlooked, but can be a really great opportunity for you. So if you'd like to connect with one of our grads, I'd be happy to do that for you. I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free to take that down or connect with me on social media. I'm on every platform, so you're welcome to connect with me anywhere. And I can get you hooked up with that. Chuck, we have another really good question in the chat. There was great question. When producing a game during a live broadcast, what are a few things you look for in a good play-by-play announcer?
I actually popped up the chat, so hopefully you might be able to see it. Coleman, looks like you've asked the question. So yeah, things I look for: pacing. Can the announcer, male or female, can they manage the moments? There are things you need to do, like if you're working out, you need to warm up a certain way. But when you get into the actual game, a lot of times you're reacting. And so I'm looking for a play-by-play person that can take care of the mechanical things. Here's the lineups, here's the officials, here's some of the series history, here's some of the storylines we're getting involved with. But then you're in flight, as we refer to it, and can they manage the moment and match what we're doing in their ears with the graphics, with replays? Can it come together? Because that's all happening in real time. It's not like I can say to them, hey, in 3 seconds, I'm going to show you this, or here comes a graphic in 5 seconds, and it's going to tell you da. So to answer your question, I look for someone that can manage the moment, take care of the things that are really important to manage, and then can they deliver on the goods? I'm a big fan, a friend of mine, Al Michaels. I think he's one of the best announcers of our generation. He just manages the moment. I had a chance to work with him during the Stanley Cup coverage when I worked with ABC. Just an outstanding individual. He would be someone you could listen to, and probably people now coming up in California. His name escapes me all of a sudden. He does LA Dodger baseball. He does a very good job of it as well. I see another question. Landon, I'm most interested in snowboarding and surfing action sports filmmaking. Should I use a GoPro to film? I think the answer is yes, you totally could, especially if you can get it out into the water, or you can get it on a chase board, or someone else is able to help you. I think those are great ways to capture and be out in a setting. Typically, when they capture surfing action in the olden days, we'd have to have cameras set up on the beach and zoom out, and you'd basically get a one-dimensional look. Sometimes you were able to put a boat, but you can't get the boat into the seas or into the breaks. So you really couldn't get that great look. Now with drones, I mean, if you watched any of the Daytona 500 last night, they now have drones that are going 60 and 80 miles an hour, and they're taking the fan right down to where the action is. I know the cars are going almost 200 and 220 miles an hour, but you still get this sense of speed. In your case, you know, the break of the wave, where were they dropping in? Were they getting out? Did they do the technical things they needed to do to score the correct points by the judges? So definitely, if you can do it and get it out there embedded, yes, I would make sure I would totally recommend getting the foam rubber ones that can float. I didn't learn that from experience. We did that on the rafting trip where we had all floaty devices, and I'm glad we did, because one did get knocked off and we were able to get it right out of the water.
And I would add to Chuck's point, a lot of, and you probably noticed this in that last video, but a lot of it is the creative shot and how you film it. GoPros are great, but try to think outside of the box, right? Like, don't just put it on your helmet as you're, snowboarding down the hill. Is there another place that you can put it to give a different perspective, to help somebody feel like they were there, to help someone feel like they were watching from afar? There's a lot of different ways that you can utilize those together from the same camera, but different shots. And I think a lot of times, or at least with students I work with, sometimes they don't always think about what is another creative shot I can have. It's just, oh, I have this GoPro, it has to go on my head because I'm doing some sort of adventure sport. That's not true. It can go pretty much anywhere. Those things are almost invincible in some aspects. So try to think of what that might be. Maybe you set the GoPro in the snow as you snowboard past it, right? It doesn't have to be on you or on your board. There are other options. So that's something to think about too.
Well, I know we have just maybe about 10 minutes before we have to vacate this room. I don't know if there's any other questions. Here comes Jennifer. She may be telling us to wrap and give us there's the 5-minute warning. So if there's any other questions, this has been very engaging. I hope it was at least piquing your interest. I'm super excited to know that some of you have opportunities at your high school to actually cover sports, because that's a great way to put your toe in the water. The high school that I went to, again, didn't have that, but we did have a radio station. And so we were able to do play-by-play, DJing, public service announcements, talk shows. And that's where I first got a taste of what it was like to be part of media. So it's really important to sort of cut your teeth and get started and experiment with managing content. And then as you move into college, get yourself into those opportunities where you can manage. In my opinion, if you can manage live content, the sooner you can start doing that, the better, because then that's going to put you in a position to understand how to make quick, quality, and good decisions on how to produce and present content to the viewer. Because you, in the end, and I tell my students all the time, you are like the ultimate television remote. You're like the ultimate router. You are seeing all the inputs coming in, or you're seeing all the things that the camera's captured in terms of an edit, and you're then presenting the best possible view to tell the best possible story. And you do it through video, you can do it through graphic, but you're ultimately doing the best to take the viewer a place they weren't. You were there. That's your obligation as you do this sports and adventure, is to take the person and the fans there. So hopefully you got something out of this. I know I had a blast. It was something we've been working on for a while, Whitney and Lily and a couple other people at the Reed College of Media. Jennifer, I thank you for your time. I don't know if there's any other questions or any other things that have popped up that I'm not aware of, so I'll just back out a second.
Yeah, thanks guys. It was nice to meet you all virtually.
Yes, really cool.
Sorry they can't say it, but I'm sure on the way out you guys can say hi and thank you. Thank you guys so much. You guys did awesome. I love the interactive and letting the kids that participate. So especially in Zoom, great job.
Thank you.
Normally the kids would probably come up and ask you questions, but in Zoom they can't. So off to the next session, guys. Thank you. Thank you so
Jennifer.
much.
Thank you, students. Thank you.
They're all saying thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much.
Awesome. A lot of fun.
Thanks for having us. They were a great group.
They really were. That
It's
was
so
awesome.
fun. I can't wait till hopefully it's back in person and then you guys can do it.
Yeah,
We're excited. We're excited for our first debut in person.
Yeah.
Really, that was our first debut. So it'll be interesting to see how we can take it to the next level.
No, you guys are great. Just being able to have that interactive, I think, is what is missing in Zoom. And so I think it was great. And you had a lot of kids participating. So
yeah,
great job.
Yeah, thank you for making it so interactive.
Oh, hey, David. Thanks, David. You were one of the first questions. Thank you. Hey, Lily, thanks. Thanks, Whitney.
Thanks,
Jennifer,
Adam.
thank you.
All
We'll
right.
see you maybe in the future.
Yep. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
guys.